Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Hey, Caroline, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Bryce. How are you?
Really good, really good. When we're recording this, man, we got hit with like snowpocalypse here again, which is
Yeah,
good. Like, you hear from everybody, it's like, oh, we need snow, we need snow. But yeah, once it hits, it's like, oh, yeah, I guess we technically need snow, but do we need this much snow?
it's like we just had all of our winter in one day.
Pretty
So,
much, yeah. That's okay. It makes things a little bit cozier and everything, so we need it. But hey, what a great way to start off the week, though. Starting the week off for us, we're recording another episode of Overdue Finds, so it's all good. So besides being a winter city, one of the cool things, Caroline, about living in Edmonton is that it's home to some fantastic writers. And I think you can agree with me, but over the years here on the podcast, we've had an opportunity to speak with quite a few of them. So we want to welcome to the show Delanie Tiedemann. Delanie, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, of course. Like I mentioned, Caroline, we've gotten to chat with some great local writers, and it's always one of those things. It wasn't until I started working at the library that I really realized there were so many, the Edmonton writing community was so vibrant here.
yeah, and I love that the podcast gives us a chance to connect and people reach out. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. But before we get into our overdue finds picks, I just want to quickly mention that, of course, we're in the middle of March now, or early March, I should say. So for the entire month of March, you can go to our website and any of our social media pages to vote in the 6th annual Overdue Finds March Madness Tournament. This year, your votes will determine once and for all what the best sequel is. So vote for your favorites every day, and you can also download your bracket at epl.ca/podcast and share your picks on social media by using the hashtag EPL March Madness. So, Caroline, we're right in the thick of things right now.
We are, I mean, we are in the past
We
recording
are.
this, but I am willing to put the prediction out there that there has been at least one upset so far.
Yes, and if my picks are correct, there will have been one upset so far. So we'll see when I'm listening to this when it comes out, if that's true. So, of course, right, let's move into our overdue finds picks. Delanie, so do you have a recent pick that you can share with us?
Yes, I have actually just started reading the Red Queen series. So this has been a really great book that I've dived into recently, and I've been enjoying the different take on special abilities and how they came to be, and it's been fascinating.
Nice. So how many books are in that series?
There's 4 books and actually 4 novellas too, so if I really get going, I have a lot of reading to do.
I was going to say, as a writer, is that something, like, are you constantly reading like something new, like all the time? Is that something you try and do?
Oh, definitely, but it's always just finding time to do it because, life gets in the way. But it's always good to get inspiration and see what other people are doing, and I also just love reading. I love getting lost in stories and lost in other worlds.
Caroline, what have you been enjoying lately?
I also have a book pick this week, but it is kind of a book about movies, or a book about television at the very least, and it is 50 Oscar Nights, iconic stars and filmmakers on their career-defining wins. It's a book that's put together by Dave Karger, who works for Turner Classic Movies, and it looks at 50 different Oscar winners who kind of walk through the experience of winning, in many cases, not all, their first Oscar. And what it was like, the lead up to it. It's based on interviews that he did with Oscar winners. Some of them are the ones that you might expect to find in there. You've got your Meryl Streep, you've got Michael Douglas is in there, and then there are some others who are maybe lesser known names in some categories that maybe haven't had the spotlight. So hearing about their experience as well as people who maybe don't hit the red carpet that often, I really loved it. Each interview or each profile is really only 3 or 4 pages, and there are lots of pictures. So this was a great book to kind of dip in and out of. I found once I started reading, I just got right into it. Many of them I remembered, many of the recent winners, some of them are before my time, but just the perspective of it, I just really loved, and being able to pull out some of the similarities, like with, Marlee Matlin and Sally Field both talk about how their movie star boyfriends at the time weren't actually that supportive of their nominations, and really were jealous of it. And then you have some people who are part of husband and wife creative teams, and you get to hear talking about like what that is like to be recognized with someone who you love working with so much. So everything from where they got the gowns to the jewels, and the stories of having these bodyguards following you around because you borrowed so many thousands of dollars worth of jewels. It's a perfect book for this time of year, but I think it will hold up any time. So that's 50 Oscar Nights by Dave Karger.
Nice. That sounds great. Sounds like a book I'd really enjoy, and especially like you said with the pictures. Not that I'm like, oh, all books need pictures, but I imagine there's some great fashion in there too. That's kind of fun to look through.
Absolutely, and it kind of talks through people. Some were making a statement with their fashion, and others were just like, well, I thought it looked cool, and that's why I chose it. So it touches on a lot of really great points, and every Oscar winner answers the question, where do they keep the award? So you get the whole perspective. One person says, oh, I have it on a shelf. It's not like I have a spotlight for it. Somebody else says, I built a spotlight for it. A lot of pianos in play. A lot of people saying, oh, I have it on a piano in my study. And I think, wow, that's pretty fancy. So
oh yeah,
what have you been enjoying?
So my pick is also kind of around the Oscars. So of course we've got the Academy Awards are coming up on March 10th. When you're hearing this, it's just a few days away, and this year there's so much buzz around movies like Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon, which deserve it. But to me, the movie that I'm rooting for, and it was my favorite of 2023, is The Holdovers, starring Paul Giamatti. And I know in our best of 2023 episode, I mentioned Oppenheimer was my favorite movie of the year. And I would probably right now, because now I've since seen The Holdovers, I'm changing my pick. I know, very unlike me. I'm changing my pick to go with The Holdovers now. But if you're not familiar with it, the movie's basically about this less than popular history teacher who is played by Paul Giamatti. He works at an all-boys prep school and is forced to spend the Christmas break at the school with the students who weren't able to go home for the holidays. He's also there with the school's head cook, who is played by Oscar nominee Devane Joy Randolph. Naturally, a student named Angus, who is played by Dominic Sessa, doesn't make the break easy on the two staff members who are there to look after him. What's kind of cool about this movie is that the movie takes place in 1970, and I read somewhere that director and writer Alexander Payne actually basically said, like, when he was making this movie, that he wanted to make a movie that looked like it was made in the 70s. And when you watch it, you can kind of see that. Like, there's everything I've read about it online is there was no sets built in the studio. Everything was on location. The movie was filmed digitally, but it looks like it was kind of filmed with like old stock film anyway. But yeah, the movie's incredible. It's not only touching, but it's hilarious. And I think this is also going to be one too that shows up on a lot of people's moving forward, a lot of people's a list of their favorite Christmas movies. So it does take place, obviously, during the holiday season. And, if we still have snow sticking around like we do today when we're recording, I recommend watching The Holdovers. It'll bring back Christmas a little bit for you, and it's a great movie, and I can't recommend it enough. I recommend, though, putting a hold on it. You will see that there's lots of other people who also have a hold on the movie, but I promise it'll go fast.
Yeah, that movie there's a lot of buzz around a potential Best Supporting Actress winner from the movie.
Yeah, she does a great job. She plays a grieving mother, and she's, essentially her family really is there, who's kind of like forced upon her to be there with her over the holidays. And it's a great movie. It's very touching. Caroline, I may have joked around with you about this before, but I went and saw it on on a Monday afternoon, and it was me and like a large group of seniors there watching this movie, and everybody had a blast with it. So let's get to why we're here today. Of course, we're doing a local writer spotlight on Delanie Tiedemann. And Delanie, I have to start off and say congratulations on the release of your new book, The Jump. For those who might be listening and aren't familiar with The Jump, can you explain a little bit about what the book is about?
Absolutely, and thank you. It is a science fiction novel set in a world where everyone gets a jump when they turn 18 to get a glimpse of either their past, present, or future. And then when jumpers start disappearing, the main character has to figure out why, but jumps back on track.
Yeah, it's a great, I love the premise of the book. I love the world building that takes place to have kind of the rules of the jumping and the jump world, the serum that's involved with it. It's been just over a year since The Jump was published. What's the response been like since it came out?
I've actually been very lucky to receive a great deal of support and encouragement around my book, and especially from my hometown of Tofield. The Tofield Municipal Library, they hosted my first book reading. The Prairie Willow Cove store next to the Moonshine Cafe in town was the first to sell my book in store. And the Tofield Mercury printed not one, but 2 stories about my book to help me with advertising. And
So shout out to Tofield.
Right, shout out to Tofield. And the Fox and Fable Book and Game Cafe in Camrose, they're not far from Tofield. They hosted my book launch. So a lot of local support, which feels really, really great. And then since then, in the last year, I've gotten to do a book club, 2 book signings in different chapters and Indigo locations, Words in the Park, and a reading and wine pairing. So it's been lots of opportunities to actually talk to readers, which has been very nerve-wracking, but also very rewarding and exciting.
You had shared on, I believe it's your Goodreads profile, the kind of experience of this year, this first year of the book being out in the world. Why did you want to share the experience and bring people along with you?
Well, I think a lot of people have a goal of writing and get a little bit scared to do it, and then also a little bit unsure of how to go about it. And so, or at least that was my experience, and I have lots of friends who've had that experience. So I thought I would just share what my journey was to maybe help encourage some people.
I imagine, too, for you as well, it's got to be kind of nice to have that record now. You can kind of go, in a few years or, later on in life, go back and look on it and be like, oh yeah, that was pretty fun getting to launch that.
Absolutely. It's been a dream of mine to actually publish a book. So this has been a very exciting adventure for me, and definitely documenting it is important.
Did you have any of those moments over the last year where you just kind of had this like, oh, I'm living it. I had wanted this, and now it's happening.
Very much so. I remember imagining interviews when I was a kid to be like, oh yes, how did you come up with this character? And I'd be like, well, let me tell you. So yes, to actually be talking to real people about it now and actually hear genuine interest is very crazy for me.
You said you've done a few readings and everything, and I've always been curious for writers. When you do readings, how do you determine, I guess, what part of your book that you're going to read?
Absolutely. That was a very big challenge because you don't want to read something that gives too much away, but at the same time, you don't want to read anything too close to the beginning that's kind of boring if you don't know what's going on. And yeah, very hard to decide. For myself, I my the whole story is really about the how do you decide or how do you know if your decisions are your own versus decisions that are influenced from outside things. And so I was trying to pick a part in the book that really spoke to that theme and got you thinking about those sorts of questions.
I'm just curious, like you said, you're growing up, you can picture yourself being in these interviews asking, like, how did you come up with this character? And, picture yourself being interviewed by, a big publication and maybe the Edmonton Public Library podcast, of course. But I guess, did you always want to become a writer?
Well, I've always loved the arts and I've wanted to be involved with them in every way that I could. I did theater at the Citadel when I was a kid. I have a film degree. I had an acting agent in BC for a while. I even have an interior design diploma and I worked as a designer for a few years. So I feel like I've always been writing fiction in one way or another, sometimes in the forms of scripts for my theater and film work, and sometimes in the form of short stories and novels. And I have so many half-written novels that the fact that I was able to actually finish one from beginning to end and actually see the end product is very exciting.
So what age were you when you, really started to write fiction?
Oh, goodness. I think when I've always wrote some small stories when I was in school, but I think once I went into college and university, that's when I really started writing. When I was in film school, I took a screenwriting class, and that was actually very cool for me because I could see the comparisons between theater and film and novel writing and all that sort of thing. And so that kind of sparked the beginning of writing that way. And I teach theater and film now, so I write a lot of scripts for my own classes. I find it easier to write for the kiddos I have in my class rather than try to find a script that's perfect for who I have. And so, yeah, I guess I would say university.
I'm curious about how your film and theater background may have played out in the writing of it. I am a reader who visualizes what I see. So for me, this was a highly cinematic novel to be reading. I could see it all playing out. I could see the characters, but I'm just curious if you feel that that experience, that work you've done showed up in the novel.
Oh, definitely. When I was writing in film, I was always taught every scene should have at least 3 purposes. If it doesn't, then it doesn't need to be there. And so even as I'm creating my story, that's, floating around in my head, I'm going, okay, well, what purpose is it? It's not just for plot. There's some foreshadowing happening, or there should be some information giving, or something revealed about a character. There should be lots of different purposes behind here to make this worthwhile. And it's even in the descriptions of the world itself. I tried very hard to make people's homes be a reflection of themselves. So how does that feel? The jumping facility versus the care center are very 2 different buildings, but they're reflective of the people who are using them. So trying to put a little bit of character and foreshadowing into that as well.
There have been some discussions on book Twitter that I've seen recently about the importance of having books that are written for teens, though many also have crossover appeal with adults as well. And so your book, which we do have in the teen section of the library, I was just curious if you kind of pictured the reader, if you were writing towards a specific audience, if that played in at all.
I was honestly writing for myself and how I have felt personally over the last couple decades or so, which just turned out to be a young adult age. But I do admit that I wanted my book to be accessible to as many ages as possible. And personally, that meant for me that I wanted to be aware of the content, making sure things were appropriate for a younger age because I wanted younger age to be able to read it. But that being said, I think the themes that are really strong in The Jump appeal to really any age group. The book club it was part of was actually in a senior home. So I had a great group of seniors that was really into talking about it as well. So I think the idea of having pressure behind big life decisions can be relatable to, all the ages across the board.
Yeah, as I was looking at reading it, I was very aware that I was no longer 18, which is the age that people jump in the novel, and it explains why that's an optimal age for doing it, and in a way that absolutely, like, I'm bored. I'm like, this makes total sense, but then that realizing, like, oh yeah, no, this would not, jumping now would be a very different experience for me at this age. Yeah, I think, there's something about that being 18 and on the cusp of something, and I don't know, just having that opportunity. It's just a really, really intriguing concept.
I think that came from personal experience of mine too, because I remember graduating from high school thinking, like, this is a lot to put on somebody so young to decide, like, what you're doing for the rest of your life. And there's so much pressure for it to be the right decision and to go down the right path, and that you have, just the straight path. If you had to curve, then you somehow failed in some way, and all of these kind of restraints put on you. So I think that just kind of came from my own personal beliefs and experience around that.
Here on the show, we're big fans of time travel and time travel stories. And it's always fun. Like, I know, I've had conversations with people where it's like, oh, if you can go back in time to like anywhere, like where would you go? And the idea of going to the future is never really brought up. It's always like kind of, I don't know why, but it's always like looking back, like where would you go to? If you could, but, I have to ask, obviously, with this story, and there is that time travel element. What are some of your favorite books or movies involving time travel? And did any of those kind of really help inspire the jump?
For movies, definitely Back to the Future. It's one of my favorite movie series, and I watch it over and over again. I just love the writing in it, because I love that all three of those movies relate to each other, and they talk to each other, and you can see them in any of them that you're actually watching. For books, I love Time Traveler's Wife, mainly because it's a different perspective on time travel. It's an experience that's not usually talked about. You're usually always following the person that's doing the time traveling, and this, for once, you get to see an experience of someone who's left behind, which I think is very fascinating and refreshing.
One of the things I loved in the jump is that, yeah, we often talk about, would you jump forward or would you travel back in time, but the jump has the additional option of the present. And when I was kind of talking about this book, people are like, I don't get it. Why would you jump to the present? You're in the present. But this sense of like being able to have another perspective on the world that you're living now, I feel like that is one that I appreciate more now than I probably might have at the time. If I was 18 and jumping, I probably would have wanted to do a future or a past. But now I think, I can see the appeal of seeing another side of the present.
That comes a little from my own personal paranoia. I think I always second guess my choices. I'm always thinking, am I as happy as I seem? Or like, are my friends around me authentic? And like, are like different answers you can't get unless you're the fly on the wall and you can actually see it as an outsider, right? So I love the idea of being able to jump to my present.
And how it's used as almost like a taunt when we were with the school kids around, like, if you could jump to the present and see what they'd say about you, having that perspective of it. I liked how that also showed how the experience of jumping has been embedded into like the culture when it meets the level of like childhood taunts and stuff. That's how you know you've made it.
I really appreciate you noticing that, because I took a lot of time to do that. I really wanted to emphasize that this was a world where this was normal. It wasn't a unique or coveted experience. It was expected. This is what happened. You turn 18 and you do this jump. That's just the way it is. And because, sometimes I'd have conversations with friends as I was writing too, and they'd say, well, I don't know, you bring up all these dangers. Why would you want to jump? right? Like, maybe I wouldn't take my jump. And I go, well, no, but you have to remember, you're in a world where you take the jump. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to kind of emphasize that whole, how that would feel and how that society would be thinking about it.
Yeah, like you go on a class trip to the jumping center. Like that is like it took. I mean, when I was in the 6th grade, we went on a class trip to a pulp and paper mill. But like it's the same kind of idea of just, taking something that's around you and like that's what it is. This is a place that you learn about, and you kind of in the setup in this it's going from kind of that kind of nebulous out there concept, part of their world, to something, oh, this is going to happen to me. This is real, and there are consequences. So like as it becomes less just conceptual and more personal for the characters, but the character of Quinn in particular. I think that as well, like 18 is the age for the jump and 12 for when the jump starts getting serious, just really makes so much sense based on like what characters would go through at that time.
Thank you.
In your author bio, it mentions that you have cats. Cats are very popular among librarians and library podcast listeners. So I wanted to ask about your cats. Could you tell us about them?
Absolutely. They are orange tabbies, named after Disney characters because I am a huge Disney freak. The oldest, Raja, she unfortunately passed in the summer, but she has been there for me in so many important moments of my life, including the very first post I did on social media to advertise my book. And my young cat, Oliver, she is 3 years old and a handful. She is always zooming around, but there is nobody as gentle as her with my son, and nobody as vicious as a guard dog as she is.
Oh, I love that loyalty.
Oh, it's quite embedded, Well, I'll be playing with my son in his bedroom, and Oliver likes to play under the door with us. She'll stick her paw under the door and play. And if I touch her paw, she'll full on attack me. But if my son touches her paw, she's fine. It doesn't matter.
It's funny how animals are like that with small children. I know my nephew, he just turned 1 a couple months ago, and my brother and sister-in-law, they have a dog, and the dog's older. And he's kind of grumpy, but like I know when my nephew's around him, like he can pull on his ear and try and do a little bit of tug of war with him, and the dog realizes that. And most animals do. It's like this creature is harmless, and I like to play with them. But yeah, to adults, they're just like, I don't have time for you.
You know better. Leave me alone.
Yeah, that's right. So we know creators don't always love this question, but we want to know: are you working on any new projects? And if so, can you tell us anything about them?
I actually have the sequels for The Jump floating around in my head. I'm really anxious to start writing them, but it's hard right now when I have an 18-month-old at home. He demands a lot of attention, so writing has kind of been put to the back burner. But now that things are calming down a little bit, I'm getting the handle on being a mom, I'm hoping that I'm going to fit writing back into my schedule. The Jump was all about figuring out choices and decisions and which decisions are your own. The next book, I really want to focus on the challenge of committing to your choice once you've made it. So dealing with the fallout and the judgment that inevitably comes from others and sometimes brings up these moments of regret and second-guessing yourself. And there's also a lot of questions I left unanswered at the end of The Jump, so I'd like to address those and take them further, especially around Hope, who is one of the characters.
For an author like yourself, you're working on this story, like at some point when you were first writing The Jump, were you like, I might just save that or might put that away maybe for later for maybe a possible sequel, or was that kind of always in the back of your mind a little bit?
Absolutely, because I just, as you're planning this whole world and everything that's going to come out of this and consequences that are going to come out of the plot, there's so many other kind of branches that come off that you just can't address right now in the moment because you have to address the specific plot. So yes, there's lots of other things that I had on the back burner right away and that have just developed sort of naturally on their own, and I'm excited to see where they go.
And I also have to ask too, because you mentioned, you've worked on screenplays. Have you started maybe working on a screenplay for The Jump? Or is that something that maybe comes a little bit later on?
Oh, that, I've never actually thought about it, but that would be amazing. I have almost kind of a prequel in a way. I filmed a short film, and it's called Perspective, and it's just on the film festival market right now. So we took it to the Edmonton Short Film Festival, and it was no dialogue whatsoever, just a story based in movement. And it was, again, about the idea of how can you be your authentic self if you can't connect to other people and if you're getting all these outside pressures put on you. So it was actually kind of my first attempt at this theme before I even wrote my book. So I guess you could call it a prequel.
The Jump cinematic universe.
Yes, maybe. Yes, exactly.
Oh, we're coming to the end of today's episode. Bryce, before we get to the roundtable questions, can you let everyone know what we will be chatting about on the next episode coming out on Friday, March 22nd?
In the past, we've looked at some of the best and worst endings for TV shows and movies, but on the next episode of Overdue Finds, we're going to be sharing our picks for the best and worst book endings. So tune in to hear not only our favorites, but also the ones that had us wanting more. Delanie, I imagine that was probably a topic you didn't want to hear about, but being a writer and everything. But we promise we are a very positive podcast. When we do episodes when it's like best and worst, our worst is very little.
So our roundtable questions. First one, in The Jump, every person who turns 18 gets the opportunity to travel to their past, present, or future. If you were jumping now, which of these 3 time periods would you choose for your jumping point? Bryce, I'm going to start with you. I'm curious to hear where you're jumping.
I thought about this one, and it was tough. But I actually wanted to go with the future. On this show, we do a lot of reminiscing about, stuff. We'll talk about titles from the 80s, 90s, whatever. But I think too, like in my head, I was like, okay, well, if I went back in time, where would I go? But, I kind of like just having those memories as they are. I don't think I'd want to mess any of those up if I went back and looked at it and feel differently about various events in my life. So yeah, I think I'd want to go into the future. That would be very trippy. Yeah.
Delanie, what about you?
I definitely would jump to my present, but that's just because, I don't want to have my head all confused and worried about the future, and I don't want to get lost in nostalgia for the past. The past is the past. My future, I trust, is going to be what it's meant to be. I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about my present and where I'm at and the people around me.
Yeah, I think my answer, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think 18-year-old Caroline would have jumped to the future, but present Caroline is jumping to the present, getting a bit more perspective on that. So this year's EPL March Madness contest, as Bryce mentioned, it's all about sequels. What is one sequel that you think might even be better than the original? Delanie, I'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I enjoyed Red Queen so much, so I'm hoping the next one, Glass Sword, will be even better. I've heard really good things about it, so I have high hopes that the series will just continue to get better and better.
I love it. I love the optimism on that. Bryce?
This was an easy one for me. The first one I thought of right away was Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I remember as a kid, I think I saw Terminator 2 first, and then I watched part 1, and then I was just like, part 1, it's okay. It holds up. It's very, probably a little too 80s-ish, but Terminator 2 is just, to me, that is to me, that's the benchmark for sequels that are better than the original. Caroline, how about you?
I went with Empire Strikes Back. I find A New Hope to be kind of slow. So Empire Strikes Back just has so much going on in it, and then the characters, everyone's established, you can just jump right in. So yeah, my vote in this, and probably in March Madness. We haven't talked about it yet in the past, but I think it'll do quite well in the March Madness.
And I do like that it has it's got that dark ending to it. Whereas New Hope, when it ends, it's a little corny.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Where can people go to find out more about your work and what we should be on the lookout for?
My link tree has actually all the places my book is currently available, such as Indigo, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, much more. It also has links to my Goodreads account where you can rate and review The Jump, and my Instagram page, which will have any upcoming events and news about The Jump.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode. If you haven't done so, we encourage you to subscribe so that you get all of our new episodes. Please also leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love getting reviews. And most importantly, tell a friend about the show.
Yeah, and don't forget that we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in today's show notes. And of course, we love to hear from our listeners. You can reach Caroline and myself by emailing us at podcast@epl.ca. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.